Here is a problem. You have a city, 2.5 million people in it. Every road into that city is closed. Every railway is closed. Every canal is closed. It is the middle of Europe, 3 years after the end of a war that flattened most of it. And the city cannot feed itself. It cannot heat itself. It grows almost nothing. It mines nothing. Everything it needs has to come in from outside. And nothing can come in from outside. There's exactly one thing left, the sky. So somebody sits down and does the arithmetic. How much does a city eat in a day? How much coal does it burn to survive a winter? And how many aircraft would you need to carry that much every single day for as long as this lasts? And the answer, when they worked it out, was that it could not be done. Not couldn't be done easily. Could not be done. The numbers were not close. They did it anyway for 15 months. And by the end, they were landing an aircraft in that city more often than once a minute. To understand the problem, you have to understand one strange piece of geography. When the war ended in 1945, the victorious Allies divided Germany into 4 occupation zones. And they divided the capital city the same way. 4 sectors, 4 occupiers. But the capital was not in the middle of the country. It was deep inside the Soviet zone, roughly 100 miles inside it. So the western half of that city was not a border. It was an island of about 2 million people surrounded on every side by 100 miles of territory controlled by someone who was becoming less friendly by the month. And crucially, in the rush of 1945, the Western Allies had agreed their access routes to the city on paper for road, rail, and canal, in a way that turned out later to be far less firm than anyone had assumed. The one thing that had been written down carefully in a formal agreement was the air corridors. 3 of them, 20 miles wide. That detail is the entire story. By 1948, the relationship between the occupying powers had broken down completely. The Western Allies moved to rebuild their part of Germany as one economy and introduce a new currency to do it. The Soviet response was to close the city off. It happened in stages, and then all at once. On the 24th of June 1948, all road, rail, and water traffic into the western sectors was stopped. Then the electricity supply from the surrounding zone was cut as well. And that is the situation. 2 million people in a ruined city with roughly a month's food and about 6 weeks of coal and no way in. The stated reason was technical difficulties. Everybody understood what it actually was. It was a bet. The bet was that the Western Allies had 2 choices: abandon the city or start a war to open the roads, and that there was no third option, because a third option was mathematically impossible. So let's do the arithmetic properly, because this is the part that makes the rest of it remarkable. Feeding and heating a city that size takes something like 4,000 to 5,000 tons of supplies every day. And that's a bare minimum. That's not comfort. That's the line below which people start dying. Now look at what they had to move it with. The main transport aircraft available carried about 3 tons. 3. So even ignoring everything else, you're looking at well over 1,000 flights a day, every day, indefinitely, into a small number of runways, through 3 narrow corridors, in European weather. And they didn't have 1,000 aircraft. They had, at the start, a few dozen. The commander on the ground asked how long it could be sustained. The honest answer was a few weeks, partially, before it collapsed. Nobody involved thought this was a solution. It was a way of not deciding yet. And the early weeks looked exactly like you would expect. aircraft arriving whenever they arrived, crews flying until they couldn't, loading done by hand, badly, with no standard procedure, planes sitting on the ground for hours waiting to be emptied, weather closing the corridors and everything stopping. The tonnage was nowhere near enough. It was a fraction of what the city needed, and the city was already living on stored food. Rations were cut. Electricity was available for a couple of hours a day, often in the middle of the night, which meant people got up at 2 in the morning to cook, because that was when the power was on. And there was a further problem almost nobody thinks about. The city's own airfield were not built for this. One of the main ones had a runway of pierced steel planking laid over sand, which was never designed to take thousands of heavy landings. It began breaking up almost immediately. So they put crews of workers at the edge of the runway, who ran out between landings and repaired it by hand, then ran off again before the next aircraft touched down. That is how the first months worked. Then in late July 1948, an American general arrived who had run air transport over the Himalayas during the war, which was, at that point, the hardest sustained airlift anyone had ever attempted. He looked at what was happening and reorganized it completely, and the reorganization is the actual subject of this video. Because he did not solve the problem by finding more aircraft. He solved it by removing variation. Here is the core idea. An airlift is not a flying problem. It's a queuing problem. Every aircraft that behaves differently from every other aircraft costs you space in the queue. So make them all behave identically. Every plane flies at the same speed. Every plane holds the same altitude in its assigned lane. Aircraft are stacked in layers, separated vertically, and they enter the corridor at fixed intervals. And then the rule that everyone remembers: if you miss your approach, you do not circle. You do not try again. You climb out, fly home with your load still aboard, and rejoin the queue at the back. Because one aircraft going around disrupts every aircraft behind it for the next hour. The load is worth less than the schedule. And then he did the same thing to everything on the ground, because the flying was never the limiting factor. Unloading crews were organized and drilled and timed until a fully loaded aircraft could be emptied in a matter of minutes. Crews were not allowed to leave their aircraft. Instead, a mobile snack truck drove out to meet each plane, so the crew ate at the aircraft, got the weather and their next instructions there, and turned around without ever walking to a building. Maintenance was standardized and moved to fixed intervals so that failures happened in a hangar, on schedule instead of on a runway, at random. And the whole thing was measured constantly, tons per day. Turnaround minutes, which airfield was slow and why. It stopped being a heroic effort and became a factory that happened to have wings. And the tonnage started climbing. There was still a hard limit though. 2 airfields could not take the traffic that was needed, so they built a third one inside the blockaded city in about 3 months. And the way it was built tells you a great deal. The labor was mostly local civilians, and a large proportion of them were women because of how many men the war had taken. They worked in shifts around the clock, largely by hand, crushing rubble from the ruined city to make the base of the runway. The city was, in a sense, paving its own airport with the remains of itself. There was almost no heavy machinery, because heavy machinery could not be flown in. So some of it was cut apart, flown in as pieces, and welded back together on the far side. And there is one story I have to include because it is so unlike how anything works now. 2 tall radio masts stood in the approach path of the new runway. They belonged to a broadcaster in the Soviet sector, and requests to remove them went nowhere. So the French commander in whose sector the airfield lay had them demolished with explosives. When asked afterwards how he could possibly have done that, he is said to have replied, with dynamite. The real test was always going to be winter. And the winter of 1948 is when the story stops being about food and starts being about coal. Because most of what was flown in was not food at all. By tonnage, the majority of the entire airlift was coal. It was flown in sacks, which wore out and burst, and coal dust got into everything, including the aircraft, which caused its own problems. And the city was cold in a way that is difficult to convey. Heating was rationed to a few hours a day. People burned furniture. Parks and public gardens were stripped of trees for firewood, which is why photographs of the city from those years look so bare. Fog closed the corridors repeatedly. There were days when almost nothing got through, and the tonnage, despite everything, kept climbing anyway, because the system had been built to run every hour that the weather allowed. Now, the part everybody knows, and it is worth telling properly, because it started very small. A young American pilot was standing at the fence of one airfield talking to a group of local children who had come to watch the planes. He noticed something. They asked him about the aircraft and about flying, and none of them asked him for anything. He had 2 sticks of chewing gum in his pocket. He broke them into pieces and passed them through the wire. And the children who got nothing tore up the wrapper and passed them around to smell. That detail is what did it. He told them that the next time he flew in, he would drop sweets from the aircraft and that they would know it was him because he would rock his wings on the approach. Then he made small parachutes out of handkerchiefs, tied sweets to them, and dropped them from the flare chute on his way in. It was completely unauthorized. It grew. More children came.